this guy's coming at us. I just want to go on record. He's coming full bore at us. We got to move quicker, and folks, be ready. He's not waiting till 2026. At any given time, President Trump, he could pull the carpet out from underneath us on CUSMA tomorrow with one signature.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't mince words. In a press conference that cut through political nuance, he warned that President Trump could end the CUSMA trade agreement, not in 2026 as expected, but as early as November 2025. And he may not even follow a formal process. All it could take is one signature. Ford called on Canadians to brace themselves. This wasn't a normal trade dispute, he said. It's something far more volatile. Coming from a provincial leader with strong ties to business and conservative circles, the message landed with weight. The concern is not hypothetical. Ford isn't just worried about tariffs. He's worried about USMCA itself, the legal backbone of North American trade.
Almost every country in the world that's trying to negotiate with this administration. It's very challenging. You think you're getting close to a deal, and then the cheese slips off the cracker when it gets to the president's desk. So, look, I think Ford's right.
That concern is echoed at the national level. Conservative strategist Corey Tanaki said it plainly. The worst may still be ahead. Trump's approach isn't rooted in conventional trade norms. He's abandoned negotiation frameworks, rejected predictability, and applied pressure without offering a path to resolution. The 35% tariffs imposed on Canada under the IEEPA are just one example. The deal-making process now moves according to Trump's timeline and his mood. It's not just Ford who's lost trust. There's growing doubt across Canada's leadership that any deal with this U.S. administration can be relied on. After all, Trump is threatening to override agreements he once championed. CUSMA itself was signed under his presidency.
Canada and Mexico themselves have about $50 billion in two-way trade, so that's nothing to sneeze at. It's highly unpredictable, and so both sides need to sort of get together and figure out what the hell's going on.
While Trump escalates, Canada and Mexico are recalibrating. This week, Canada's foreign affairs and finance ministers traveled to Mexico for high-level talks. The agenda wasn't ceremonial, it was strategic. Trade officials and business leaders from both countries sat down to align supply chain goals, discuss trade infrastructure, and build a united response to what one expert called a toxic atmosphere. Both Canada and Mexico are being hit with emergency tariffs, though Mexico was granted a 90-day pause. Yet the message is clear. Neither country trusts the current state of U.S. trade policy. In place of that trust, they're forming their own foundation, one grounded in mutual reliability, not coercion. But building that foundation takes time, and time is exactly what the markets may not have. On July 31st, the U.S. Court of Appeals reviewed the legality of Trump's emergency tariffs. Lower courts had ruled against them, but let them proceed, citing ongoing talks with China. If courts strike them down, Canada might be better off waiting than rushing into a bad deal. Ottawa now faces a dilemma. Take a risky agreement or wait for legal clarity that may never come.
We can either wring our hands and lament the fact that the U.S. administration is doing this, or we can get to work on building our own economy by getting started on projects that frankly should have been done 20 years ago.
Inside Canada, the message is starting to sink in. Yes, provinces have different priorities. Alberta wants to protect oil, Ontario its auto and steel industries, and Quebec its aluminum. But Ford noted that 98% of what's needed is shared. The divisions are shrinking. The urgency is growing. Large-scale national infrastructure projects, long stalled, are being revisited as a way to build internal economic strength and reduce dependence on unpredictable trade flows. It's not just about defending sectors anymore, it's about defending sovereignty. Trump couldn't force Canada to fold with tariffs. And now, facing a firm but calm Canadian government, he may try something else, dismantling the agreement entirely. Ford's warning was blunt because the stakes are real. Without CUSMA, decades of trade predictability could vanish overnight. Canada and Mexico are no longer reacting, they're preparing. Because when trade becomes a power game, stability becomes strategy. And in this game, survival may depend not on what Trump does next, but on how Canada and Mexico respond together.
In a social media post, Trump said, quote, "The August 1st deadline is the August 1st deadline. It stands strong and will not be extended."
President Trump announced a tariff extension for Mexico this morning, posting to social media, "We have agreed to extend for a 90-day period."
On July 31st, the White House stood firm. No country would get an extension. August 1st was the final cutoff. That's what the world was told. No delays, no exceptions. The U.S. would begin slapping 35% tariffs on goods from any nation that hadn't signed a new trade deal. But hours before the deadline, Trump changed his mind. Mexico got a 90-day extension. Canada didn't. This wasn't a small footnote. It revealed something deeper about how Trump's trade strategy is playing out and who it's really targeting.
Mexico is a very unique situation of all the other countries around the world because, of course, we share our southern border with Mexico.
The administration had spent weeks repeating that there would be no further delays. The tariffs were set in motion months ago and had already been pushed back once, from April to August. Officials said publicly that countries had time and the deadline would be enforced. But just before midnight, Trump suddenly spared Mexico. The reason? According to his spokesperson, Mexico is a unique case because of its shared southern border and recent cooperation on stopping drug and human trafficking. That framing sounds logical at first, but when Canada is brought into the picture, the logic starts to unravel. Canada also shares a long land border with the United States, over 5,500 miles, the longest undefended border in the world. The two countries are deeply tied through CUSMA, which still governs the majority of their trade. So why didn't Canada get the same 90-day grace period? Trump's team didn't offer a clear answer. What's clear, though, is that Canada wasn't even in the running for an exemption. Instead, the White House seemed focused on escalation. Just hours before tariffs took effect, Trump cited issues far outside trade, like Canada's recent recognition of Palestine, as a reason for breakdowns in negotiations. It had nothing to do with customs or commerce, and everything to do with politics. This wasn't about trade strategy, it was pressure politics, plain and simple. The same playbook Trump used on Brazil. Trump's decision to exempt Mexico wasn't rooted in a broader policy shift. It was a political calculation. While the administration framed it as a border issue, that logic crumbles under scrutiny. The U.S. has critical economic and security ties with Canada too, especially in energy. Canada supplies over 4 million barrels of oil per day to the U.S., according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, making it America's top foreign energy source by far. Yet no exemption was offered. The real difference? Mexico agreed not to retaliate. Canada didn't. Prime Minister Mark Carney continued negotiations but refused to rush into a lopsided deal. And in Trump's world, standing firm doesn't earn you more time, it earns you a target.
Well, they have to pay a fair rate. It's all. It's very simple. They have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers. Farmers very badly. They've been treating our country very badly for years. And look, we like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. But they've been very poorly led.
Despite the pressure, Canada didn't blink. Trump's move may have been designed to trigger panic in Ottawa, but it didn't. Officials stayed the course. No public outburst, no rushed announcement, no last-minute signature. While Mexico's deal is still undefined and its exemptions temporary, Canada is choosing clarity over chaos. Economists from multiple Canadian outlets have pointed out that over 80% of Canadian exports still flow tariff-free under CUSMA. That buys time, and more importantly, it gives leverage.
This guy will say something one day, and he'll wake up, and the cheese slips off the cracker, and then all of a sudden he goes the other way. And you're thinking, how do you deal with a guy like this?
What we saw on August 1st wasn't a rulebook being followed. It was one man's playbook, where deadlines bend, allies are tested, and pressure is personal. Trump gave Mexico more time because it fit his optics. He denied Canada that same time because Ottawa didn't fold. But trade isn't just about theater. And Canada's refusal to rush shows that it understands that. In the end, that calm might prove to be its strongest move yet.
Scott Moe says that there needs to be increased cooperation with China. A news release that you guys had issued yesterday said that there needs to be a better working relationship on trade with China. That's specifically what the premiers were calling on the Prime Minister to do. So help me reconcile those two things. Is China the enemy, or do we work with China?
Premier Doug Ford didn't hold back. In the middle of one of the most uncertain trade climates in North American history, Ontario's premier stood before reporters and said the quiet part out loud: if Trump's tariffs continue, Canada may look east to China. This wasn't just a warning, it was a signal, a shift. One of Canada's most powerful provincial leaders openly floated the idea of deepening trade with Beijing, not Washington. And for the US, that could mean more than just a lost customer. It could mean a long-term strategic blow. So what happens if Canada actually pivots to China? Let's break it down. Since returning to the White House, President Trump has made tariffs the centerpiece of his trade agenda once again. His administration argues this is about fairness, making sure America isn't taken advantage of. But for Canada, these policies haven't brought clarity. They've brought volatility. Steel, aluminum, autos, and even softwood lumber have been hit. And now, a sweeping 35% tariff looms over all non-compliant Canadian goods starting August 1st. For business leaders across North America, this isn't a negotiation tactic. It's a threat that keeps shifting, and it's reshaping the foundation of what used to be the world's most stable trade partnership.
You know what Churchill said, our enemy of our enemy is our friend, and as long as China plays fair and doesn't undercut our markets, be it the auto sector or any sector, I have no problem dealing with them.
In response, Canada hasn't shouted, it's acted. Ottawa has quietly escalated its own tariffs on American steel and aluminum, matching the US increases. But more importantly, Canada is shifting focus. While there's still strong trade with the US, provincial leaders are building escape routes, pipelines, new export lanes, and diversified partnerships. That includes China. Ontario alone conducts over $43 billion in two-way trade with China, according to provincial figures. Imports dominate that number, but Ford is clear. If the US continues to act unpredictably, Canada will work with whoever plays fair, and that includes China. Even as Ford emphasizes protecting Canada's auto sector from Chinese EVs, his message is unmistakable. Canada is no longer beholden to the United States. We've already seen the signs. Canadian brewers are sourcing aluminum cans from China, not the US, due to skyrocketing prices from Trump's tariffs. RBC reports that as of June 2025, nearly 90% of Canadian exports entering the US are now fully USMCA compliant. A defensive move, proving Canadian businesses are adjusting supply chains to navigate around American uncertainty.
We buy about $349 billion of products. So Japan and the rest of the countries around the world have quite a bit to catch up to what we purchase off the US.
If Canada's pivot becomes permanent, the US will feel it in ways that go far beyond headlines. In 2024, Canada purchased $349 billion worth of American goods, more than Japan, Germany, and the UK combined. Losing even a portion of that trade to China would hit US manufacturers hard. Sectors like autos, machinery, agriculture, and energy rely on stable cross-border flows. If Canadian buyers shift orders to Chinese suppliers, the pain will be domestic, felt in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And it's not just about goods. Strategically, China has long sought to expand its influence in the Western Hemisphere. A deeper trade relationship with Canada would give Beijing more leverage in North America, something Washington has tried to avoid for decades. In trying to punish Canada, Trump may be pushing it into China's arms. Trump promised to win better trade deals. But tariffs have delivered something else: hesitation, retaliation, and uncertainty. Instead of pulling Canada closer, the White House is driving a wedge. A country that once stood as America's closest economic ally is now exploring other options, because it feels like it has to. Trump's tariffs were designed to protect American workers. But if those policies fracture trade relationships and push partners toward rival powers, then the damage may run far deeper than economic losses. In this new trade world, isolation isn't strength, it's a liability. And for the US, The question isn't whether tariffs backfire. It's how long we're willing to pretend they didn't.